Hey, Sadie.
Yes, Daddy?
Call your mother.
Okay. Ring, ring.
Hello?
Hi, Mommy.
Hey, Sadie. Thanks for calling.
No problem. These days, it's extra important to stay connected.
From the Newman family to all of you, be well, stay safe, and call your mothers. Ooh. Ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101.
Word.
Alex Viscasil, Live Nation Canada, and I'm on Promoter 101.
So we find ourselves crossing paths once again, friends. It's the Promoter 101 podcast, the quarantine sessions, and we're ready to rock out with our Luke Pierce outs.
Luke Pierce outs, man. I don't know exactly what parts those are, but probably going to get wild, Dan. Big show today. I sit down later with CAA's Ina Jacobs for a one-on-one that left me breathless, Dan.
You leave me breathless, Luke. And let me tell you what else. First Avenue's Dayna Frank talks to us about the brand new NIVA, the association of all the independent venues and promoters coming together and trying to unify to get Congress to help them out. This is a new day in the industry, my friend, a new day.
Really excited about that interview. Plus, we're going to get into Steiny's Facebook post that Sunday morning broke the internet.
Promoter 101 starts right now.
Becca Leifer, Operations Manager at Forest Hills. I'm on Promoter 101.
So we're back on Promoter 101. You can always get in touch with us by dropping us an email at steiny@promoter101.net. That goes to me and Luke. Just tell us what's on your mind, show ideas, topics, something pissing you off. We want to hear about it.
We've been overwhelmed with everybody joining the conversation during this crisis. All the feedback, all the thoughts, all the questions, those are great. We hope you join us. We're on Twitter the show is at Promoter 101. I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Dan is at The Jew. And over on Instagram, Dan is at Steiny Promoter 101. Dan presents, and I'm at W. Luke Pierce.
And as always, don't forget to check us out at the World Wide Web at Promoter101.com. Plus, now find us on LinkedIn.
Hello, this is Danny Rogers. My company is called Lunatic Entertainment, calling in from Sydney for Promoter 101.
Sadly, the show has gone away. For the most part, we're back for the quarantine sessions, but all the past episodes are up on the Promoter 101 website. You can catch all the episodes. And our featured episode this week, well, it's all of them. They're all my favorite. They're like my favorite children. I can't pick amongst them, Luke. So this week we celebrate the entire catalog. Check them all out at promoter101.net right now.
Dan, there's just not a bad one in the bunch. So, hey, if you've got a free minute, check one out. Drop us a review or subscribe to the Promoter 101 podcast. Tell a few friends.
Hi, this is Jason Kupperman from Paradigm, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
We are excited about a special segment today, a very special guest, somebody who has been fiercely charging forward in the last couple of years as an independent promoter. The CEO of First Avenue, Dayna Frank, is here to join us to talk about NIVA. That's the National Independent Venue Association, and their efforts to lobby Congress for federal aid and support for stages that are dark all across America. Dan sat down with Dayna. Let's welcome her to the podcast.
And Dayna Frank from First Avenue in Minneapolis is the president of the brand new association that's come together, the National Independent Venue Association. She's here right now to tell us what's going on. Dayna, thank you for making time.
Thank you so much for having me. I love how official everything sounds. I think we are perhaps 16 or 17 days old at this point, figuring it out as we go.
But already 900,
1,000
venues have already become part of this.
And promoters, venues and promoters.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a silver lining of this nightmare, I would say seeing people come together and collaborate and, you know, even indie promoters or venues in similar markets that usually compete or usually don't talk at all, seeing them come together to work to save a whole industry is really inspiring.
Yeah, I heard in Milwaukee, both Leslie West and Gary Whitt both came to the table on that. So it's like dogs and cats bonded to make this happen. So obviously you guys are concerned with the future of your venues as independent business owners. What exactly are you guys focused on at this moment to protect the venues?
We undertook a federal lobbyist effort because reading the press that was coming out, the early days of the shutdowns, March 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, et cetera, you just try to consume as much information as you can get. And it was all about, Live Nation, AEG, how devastating this was for the whole concert industry and for our employees and artists. But at the end of all the articles, there was a little tagline that said, but Live Nation, AEG, they're going to be fine. They're going to come out of this with so much more market share because all the independents are going to go. And that was like a real aha moment for me, being like, what kind of landscape are we going to wake up to when this is over? And what can we do right now to make sure that it's the landscape that we want to see in the music industry and the ecosystem is preserved as much as we possibly can. And so, looking at the CARES Act and the stimulus bill, we are shut because of public health. In order to ensure the health of our nation and our communities, we have to shut down. We can't operate. And in that case, the government has to protect us because we're shutting for the public purpose and we're going to need help to make it through this.
So that you guys are shut for the greater good, and because of the greater good, you should be protected for the same reason.
Yep, exactly. We have no revenue. We see our industry, all industries are important. Everyone contributes, but our industry is 100% shut down. Maybe we're selling a $20 t-shirt here and there, but, primarily 99% of our revenue is completely gone.
Okay. And these are venues that Live Nation, AEG, everybody comes into and works with. Independents work with them, but we're talking about some of the greatest venues in the country and 1,000 venues, 1,000 promoters. That's a lot of different rooms and a lot of different associations. It's not just about the indie surviving. It's about having places for bands to play for anybody, regardless. There has to be places to go see shows when we come out of this, or there will be no arts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about preserving the whole music ecosystem. If bands and artists, when they emerge and when they come up in their local communities, don't have the clubs and theaters that take the early shots on them, what is the artist community going to look like? How are people going to feed their families and pay their bills, before they make it big? Again, it's all about what kind of world do we want to come out of this with, and starting to work on that and help create that right now. And, the reason we focus on indie venues and promoters is because of the special endangerment of them right now. These are people, myself included, that have huge capital costs, that have huge rents or mortgage, personal guarantees, already leveraged, and absolutely no financial backstop, right? We don't have shareholders. Some don't have investors. There's no financial protection against a total loss of revenue. And so that's why we feel they need special protection right now.
Right. And understanding if a club closes down because the person running the club was a bad business person is one thing, but something like this, where the entire industry and nation is closed down, it's not something you can prepare for.
Totally. It's not even a recession where it's like, okay, maybe you need cheaper tickets and you need cheaper beer and you can adjust to the market. There's no adjustment here. We are 100% shut down.
People want to get involved. NIVA has a website and is already set up to take new applicants and get involved, and you still can get involved, right? Where should people go if they want to get involved?
Yeah, so our website, no fee to join. I want to give a special shout out to our benefactors, sponsors, really some of the most amazing companies that I've ever worked with, C-Tickets and Light and eTix, coming to the table early and recognizing the importance of this right now and just stepping up in unbelievable ways.
The venues can just come to the table. It's no more pressure on them.
No fee to join.
Get involved, be there, add to the locomotive that is already running down the tracks and add their steam to it.
Yep. And so when you join, you get linked into our lobbying effort and the resources and the infrastructure needed to contact the local representative, to share our story, to, just express to Congress. Because I think there's a lot of confusion about what we do. And I think what's so cool about this podcast and why I'm so honored to be here is because you kind of break it down in ways that I hadn't, really read or heard before in just such awesome ways. But, people see us in different ways, right? Some people see us as, arts nonprofits. We can go to the NEA. Look at you. You get tons of corporate money. Or they see us as like, the troublemakers that just, put drunks onto the street. But I think the really important story and why, is why we're so important to our local communities. We're economic generators. We are community builders. Most of NIVA members that I'm talking to all day have spent 20, 30 years, building up their local block, building up their whole neighborhood. We open and the restaurants want to come in, and then the developers want to come in because people want to live there. Retail comes in. And so we're not just a venue, we're a whole ecosystem, and not just artistic, but economic. And so that's the story that we really have to tell and get across. That story gets really passed over a lot. Like we've been talking, I have a daily call with our chamber and our downtown business alliances, and they're all asking me like, well, when are you guys open? Because, the restaurants and the hotels, like no one wants to open until you're open. You bring all the traffic, so there's a whole ecosystem supported by our businesses that are really important as tax generators, as employers, civic community members.
I know you're involved with many other venues besides just the First Ave, particularly in the St. Paul, Minneapolis market, but you clearly aren't going to open any of your doors until there's a safe way to do that, as you care about your patrons and your artists way too much and your staff. So we need to get you through this time. So when it's time to go back and it's safe to go back, there's a venue to go back to.
Absolutely.
And, we're ready to rock when that happens. And the legend of First continues, and all the other venues around the country. I can't thank you enough for taking time, Dayna, and telling us what's going on and taking the charge on this, because this is so really important in this time that we all come together and make sure that we're all still standing on the other side of this.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. Look forward to seeing you soon in person, maybe hanging out at a show once, conference. I can't wait for that day.
Promoter 101, hanging out with Dayna Frank, the National Independent Venue Association, NIVA. Get involved now, get involved fast, add your fuel to the fire. This is an issue that everyone needs to take seriously in our industry. Thank you, Dayna.
Thank you.
I am a fan of Dayna Frank. She does so much in the industry, runs venues, restaurants, and now is bringing us all together. So glad she was able to take time and tell us what the brand new NIVA Association is up to. And man, do we need them to come out ahead in this, because without the venues, there is no industry. We need a place for us to all congregate, see shows, and support our teams. Thank you, Dayna, and all that NIVA is doing to keep these guys afloat.
My name is Mark Ryder, and I work at Metallica HQ in the Bay Area of California, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
All right, everybody, it is the name of the show, so let's get to it. Steiny's Tweets of the Week. Dan, you've kind of been quiet the past few weeks, and we know that wasn't going to last. So this past Sunday morning, you stirred the pot a little bit with a remark on Facebook that prompted a couple hundred comments, thoughts, and questions, and a big discussion here online from some of our listeners. And I thought we'd talk about it a little bit here. So you said, and I quote, "Shows will be allowed to return as markets reopen, and it appears there will be a final round of reopening in each market, which will, of course, depend on local officials, clearly based on how the curve looks in each market, which is still anyone's best guess. With that in mind, what will venue capacities look like with social distancing safety measures in place? I expect capacity to be greatly reduced, at least at first, without a vaccine. Anyone else thinking about what this will look like?" So, Dan, hundreds of voices from out the industry came across here, laid down some thoughts. Let's break this one down and talk about it. When will the show come back, and how will it come back?
Well, it's certainly going to be market for market. And I think everybody agrees that this starts with the local government officials, whether it's the governors, the mayors, city officials in one way or another, health department, are all going to tell us when we have the green light to go ahead and open. And you assume there's going to be some caveats with that. Best practices will be established. You've got to assume social distancing is going to be paramount. There might be some form of temperature taking at points of entrance. Masks, I would assume, possibly gloves. How do you reduce capacity for sure with social distancing? Because venues clearly are set up to get as many people in as close as possible. And that's just going to have to be something that we're reworking the whole structure of the deal around, what the new vibe is going to be, what the new reality is. Well, we get things back on track. Well, we still don't have easy testing in place everywhere. We don't have the herd immunity in place yet, and we don't have a vaccine. So there's a lot of ifs and needs that are going to have to fall together while we're trying to start to restart the economy, particularly in the music industry.
I think it's going to be a challenging answer to these things, Dan, and I don't think there's going to be a clear linear path towards it. I think to your point, this whole recovery is going to be a series of progress and retreat and progress and retreat and progress and retreat. And I imagine we see at least 3 cycles of that kind of graduated progressive opening, followed by increases in hospitalizations, confirmed cases, and all the other kind of symptomatic things that are associated with large-scale gatherings with this disease out there without a treatment or a vaccine. And then we retreat back into, most of these cities and states and municipalities, and the states at the very least are offering this 4-phase reopening plan. I think you're going to see a lot of people move from phase 1 to phase 2, back to phase 1, from phase 2 to phase 3, back to phase 2. It's not going to be a process that takes a linear path. And I think the mayors, the public health officials that are doing the best are the ones that are paying attention to new confirmed cases. They're paying attention to hospitalization rates. They're seeing what the effects of reopening the economy have in a very scientific way and paying attention to that data and assessing their next moves based on that. So it's going to be an interesting time, Dan, before we even kind of see that on a governmental level. Now, when you break it down even more into the music business and these venues, I think it's going to be, nightmarish almost at first. I mean, how are we going to make grosses work in venues with fixed costs now spread across 15% of overall capacities? You're not going to, if you're opening up 20% of capacities of venues, you're not going to make the ticket prices 5 times higher, are you? I mean, it just, the mechanics in the deal are going to be really difficult to figure out for a little while, I think, at those things. Unless venues are cutting massive deals on, rent breaks and things like that. There's still a lot of expenses in doing shows, as we all know.
You just laid down a lot of questions, so let's unravel them one at a time. So first of all, let's put the deal aside for a moment between, let's call it home free, you and me, something we're going to wind up dealing with, right? So let's put the deal aside because I think we need to know what the economics are of the capacity, what the room's going to be, and figure out what the gross is before you and me worry about splitting the money up. We have to first figure out how we can safely put the band on the road, produce the show, get the fans in. Once we figure out what those economics are, which we're a long way off from, because each market is going to tell us you can put this many people in this room. Here's the plan. Here's what you can actually sell. Then we can look at the gross, figure out what that means, and then we can figure out if there's even a deal to be had or if the economics don't allow once we look at the show costs and the new cost of cleaning and prevention and all the things that are involved. And then we can start to unravel what the new world looks like. So I think that's the first step. What is the capacity? When is the market going to open? What are the new rules? And then we have a conversation about what the deal is. But until we can paint the full picture with what the capacity is, what the new scaling would be, how that even works, I think we're too far out, too many variables. I don't know that there's a conversation we can address.
We're going to have to figure something out. There's going to be new protocols, new industry standards set for cleaning. I've been doing a lot of research into machines that utilize UV in hospitals and are able to effectively clean rooms in about 6 minutes, turn everything on for 2 minutes, UV zaps it, they turn everything over in 2 minutes, zap it again for 2 minutes, and effectively cleans hospital rooms in that manner. And I think that we're going to have to find something like that for dressing rooms, for bathrooms at venues. I mean, it's going to be nightmarish figuring out a way to take the reasonable steps to create a safe environment for audiences, for artists, for crews, for venue staff to come into on a daily basis. And I just don't even know where we're beginning.
Seeing what happens in Asia and Europe as they open up first is they're starting to roll out some potential shows and taking common practices from what they're figuring out there and making our tweaks on that stuff. But I think we're going to have to all work together. But yeah, everybody's talking. We're all trying to figure it out, but there's so many ifs and whats, and it's early days. And we all want to be back in. And I think the expression I heard this week that I thought was great was on the Polestar Town Hall. We're all trying to figure out how to move back into a house that's still on fire. We have to wait for them to put the house out, and then we can make plans from then. But the house is still on fire.
We're going to have this conversation for weeks to come, Dan. We're just now looking over the edge of what this looks like. And I'm glad that there are very smart minds out there in the world helping to solve these problems.
Want to talk about the other tweets since you were giving me such a hard time the last couple of weeks?
I do.
Came back to the table, buddy.
You crawled out of the hole, and you're back, just stirring shit like usual, Dan. So you had some ones here that I liked. This one in particular, maybe it's just me, but I'm starting to wonder if we collectively elected a lot of the wrong people to office.
I thought that would make you smile.
You know how I feel about this, Dan. Of course we did. Of course.
I tend not to get too political, but I think we can all admit that maybe we might be better off with different leadership at this particular moment.
Quite literally anyone else. It'd be fine. Dan, how about this tweet? Will we get credit for this time counted against future home arrest sentences?
Fair question, right?
Are you planning on house arrest sometime soon, Dan?
Danbury minimum security, but yeah.
Wow. You're pulling out some Connecticut stuff there. That's very white collar of you, Dan.
No, I jest. I think I picked an industry where I'm pretty safe, but I don't know. We'll take the credit, right? I mean, we might be willing to try more shit if we knew we had credit in the bank, right?
Yeah.
This is probably not a good idea in hindsight. Maybe we shouldn't allow credit, but I like the idea of getting a get out of jail free card. I like it.
I think that'll do it for Tweets of the Week, Dan. You can follow Dan on Twitter. Keep up with all of his, hopefully more than usual, rants online. The Jew on Twitter.
Hey, this is Brian O'Connell with Live Nation, and we are on Promoter 101.
In our feature session this week, we feature CAA's Ina Jacobs joining Luke for a sit-down one-on-one right here on Promoter 101.
Ina Jacobs was a name I first heard from my friend Brian Hill at Creative Artists Agency. I was looking for someone to help one of my clients' team with a few production resource questions, and he said there was a CAA agent in the Los Angeles office who was a jack of all trades and might be able to help me out. She had worked in the industry for years at the arena and stadium level as a tour manager and tour accountant for some of the biggest names, and CAA had hired her to help clients looking for exactly what I was. Agencies are known for developing and extending services to their clients, from hospitality to ticket buys to tour marketing and more. But I thought to myself, that role and that position sounds like the coolest thing for an agency to have. It's like a Swiss Army knife of an expert in the touring world to walk clients through problems that only someone with decades of experience at the highest level of touring could tackle. And so I got in touch with her via Mr. Hill, and we had a great few conversations. And then now I'm very excited to welcome Ina Jacobs to Promoter 101. Ina, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well on this rainy Nashville Sunday, just settling in, doing my social distance thing. How about yourself?
Fantastic on this gorgeous day in California, just before May gray kicks in. So I took a lovely walk in the park.
Sounds like an awesome day in Los Angeles. You might be one of the most interesting utility player roles in an agency that I've ever heard of or met. In addition to being an agent at CAA, you bring 20 years of experience from the road. You were in leadership roles to some of the biggest names, arena and world tour stadium kind of names, like John Mayer, One Direction, Mumford & Sons, Swedish House Mafia, and Nickelback. That is quite the resume there. I imagine it starts somewhere, right? Can you take us through your first job in music, when it was, and what you were doing?
Absolutely. Well, from a young age, I knew I wanted to be in music. After I saw my first concert, I sort of became obsessed with live music. It was like I had seen the meaning of life, and I was like totally obsessed with trying to figure out like what is happening backstage. But, back then we didn't have the internet. It was in the old days. So I had no idea how to go about that. Like you couldn't Google, I love music and I'm good at math. What next? So I didn't even know what a record label was. And I had finished high school and I moved to New York City to go to NYU, and my dorm was a few blocks away from CBGB's. So I sort of set my eyes on that. I had found out like what CBGB's was, figured out that it was like this iconic venue, and I sort of became slightly obsessed. And so I went to that venue probably once a week for months on end, harassing them to try and get them to give me a job. And then finally they realized months in, like, this woman is not going to go away. And they acquiesced and they gave me a job. And I worked with Louise Parnassa, who was the booking agent there for a very long time, and Hilly Crystal, who was the owner. And they basically, had me doing everything from organizing the files and answering the phone and picking up Hilly's cleaning and cleaning up after his dog and working the door and listening to the tapes that were sent in, and booked the Sunday and Monday shows, which basically like pay to play vibes. And it was then when I learned about like, what is a tour manager? And people go on the road and they get in a van and they drive around the country. And I was was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then that's sort of like where I got that bug of like, how do I get on the road? Like, what does that look like? So then I sort of set my eyes, like around just before my 20th birthday, I set my eyes on working for Bill Graham because I felt like, that would be a dream. Like he is like the promoter of promoters. Right. And I was a bit of a deadhead. And so I always wanted to live in San Francisco. So I'd planned to move to San Francisco, and then Bill died in this helicopter crash, like right before I was set to move in the October, and I was moving in January. So that dream was over, and I decided, forget it. I'll move to San Francisco anyway. And I was lucky enough, John Brannigan, who I knew from CB's, made a call to Dawn Holiday for me and got me a job working with her as the booking agent for the Paradise Lounge. But I still had my sights sort of set on the road, and I did a bunch of other odd jobs when I was there. I booked Bimbo's 365 Club for a millisecond, and I worked with Bonnie Simmons. And anyway, at that time, the Jesus Lizard was like one of my favorite bands. And I had fostered a friendship with them from my CB's days, and I'd let them crash on my floor after gigs in New York City and San Francisco. And I thought they were like the greatest live band ever in the world. Still think that they are one of the greatest live bands ever in the world. And I sort of realized very quickly while being in San Francisco that I was never going to get a job at BGP because nobody ever left those jobs there. Like once you're at BGP, you don't leave. And so I packed up my U-Haul and I decided I'm going back to New York. And on the way, I stopped in Chicago and I asked David Yao, the lead singer of the Jesus Lizard, if I could crash on his couch. And then soon, after being there for, the afternoon, I realized, oh my God, they're going on the road in 2 weeks. And so I basically staged a sit-in and told him, I'm not leaving your house until you give me a job and go on the road with you. And he, of course, was like, no, we're not taking you on the road with you. And I was like, I'm not leaving your house until you agree to take me on the road with you. And so after, hours of me begging and pushing, they acquiesced again. And they said, okay. So I went and dropped my stuff off in New York, and 2 weeks later, I hit the road with the Jesus Lizard, driving the van and selling merch and loading in and doing whatever they told me while they endlessly picked on me. Pretty much how that happened.
What were those first couple of gigs on the road like? What are you moving around in right now?
In the beginning, I was getting up and driving the van and loading in the gear, and you're doing everything at that stage. So it's van with trailer. I was in a van for a good 3-4 years. It took a long time to get me to a bus. But then, once you go to a bus, you can't go back. But pretty punk rock, sharing beds and sleeping in Motel 6s and, eating McDonald's for breakfast. And, it was hardcore rock and roll. It was kind of incredible. Like I look back now and I think how incredible those years were. I don't think I could do them now, but they were pretty amazing. When you're in your early 20s, you can do that stuff.
And you had a great run with some great names as well, too, leading up to the time with the world tours and arena stuff. You work with Jack Appears, Better Than Ezra, Medeski, Martin and Wood, Christina Aguilera. What was that like? What were those years like?
Oh, those years were really incredible because it's really when I started to sort of sharpen my nails and figure out like what it was like to be on the road. And when you're finally, you're going nonstop 9 months a year, again and again and again. Jacko Pierce was a really incredible opportunity because I was with them for a good solid 2.5 years and we were doing, 150, 200 shows a year, something crazy. And, that's when you really get to figure out like who you are and how you do that job, and you get to figure it out and you get into the swing of things. And once you get on the road with the band and you stay with them for quite some time, you become a well-oiled machine. So that's really when you get to develop like who you are, like who are you in this job? What is that? What does that look like? And you get to figure out also like what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And, I loved my years being a tour manager. It was a dream of mine. But after 9 years, I sort of started to realize that the babysitting was not really my jam, and that the finances and the mathematics of it was much more interesting. But all of the artists that I work for were really, really fantastic, except for maybe a few, which I will not mention. And they really offered me an incredible opportunity of growth and, to see the world also. Been to every state in America, and I've seen the world, so I'm incredibly grateful for that.
You talked about loving the math more than the babysitting side of things, maybe the tour management part of the business. And your first gig as a tour accountant was with John Mayer, who is definitely one of my favorite artists, and you were with him for the better part of a decade. And those years were really formative for you, and they were really formative for John. This was John on the come up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I started with John not right at the beginning, but just before he broke. I mean, they knew he was going to break, and it was such a phenomenal experience to be a part of that growth. And for me, that was an incredible growth for my own career, just because it was really an opportunity to be a tour accountant when I never thought that was going to be possible. I didn't know any other women being a tour accountant who were a tour accountant at that time. And I really thought that it was going to be impossible for me to do that. But I'm really incredibly grateful to Scott Clayton and Michael McDonald and Rick Veneris, who were the three amigos for John at that time. And I had worked with all of them at different areas. Scott was the agent for Jacko Pierce. Rick Veneris was the business manager for Minetti Martin Wood. Michael and I knew each other. I think I was like the support act for a band with Dave Matthews. And so the three of them sort of came together and asked me if I wanted to come out and be the tour accountant. At that time, when John was first starting, it was like, do you want to book the travel, be the tour accountant, and be the PA also? And I sort of was like, whatever I could do to actually be a tour accountant, yeah. And then as John started to grow and, really start to move up, I gave up the PA responsibilities, but continued to do all of the tour accounting. And that was just incredible years for me, being able to figure out what is a tour accountant, what do I want that job to be for me. I really felt like it was an opportunity for me to create the job description that I felt like needed to be tour accountant. I didn't know any tour accountants really that much at that time, or I'd crossed paths with them, but it was always quite intimidating to talk to them. And so I didn't really have anybody teaching me how to do that. And so it really allowed me to just sort of figure out what I thought that job should be. And also, I got to hear John Mayer play every day, and I'm a super fan. I will wave the John Mayer flag all day long. He's just a phenomenal, phenomenal artist.
Not a bad soundtrack to your workday, for sure.
Oh, my God. No, soundcheck was like the best.
Did he take long sound checks?
Sometimes, yeah. I was like working out stuff. I mean, it's just like jamming along at soundcheck. You're just like, I could listen to this all day long. I had a 10-year run with an artist that I thought was amazing and phenomenal. So the opportunity to really be able to enjoy the fruits of that, because I've also been on tour with bands that weren't really my cup of tea, right? So, the show time was just, let's settle the show and settle up. But it wasn't like I was running out to check out the show. But every day with John, it was like, what is he playing? And I'd sort of figure out, hey, can we settle the show after he plays this song? So thankfully, Gravity was usually at the end. So settlement was usually done by then. That was always what I wanted to see.
Rush out for Gravity. I love it.
Oh, my God. Best song ever.
So along that way during that run with John, and this is John, right, leading, he's mostly support for arena acts at this point. This is early 2000s, right?
No, I mean, when I started with John, I don't feel like we were really support at that point. He was doing his own shows, but they were smaller at first, those like smaller amphitheaters, or we still had like a bunch of small clubs. We also had the trio tour, which was more of a club tour, which was some of the greatest music I've ever heard in my life. But then, he started to blow, and not soon after he was in arenas and amphitheaters. It was a pretty quick trajectory. It was a lot of growth for me to learn pretty quickly on how to keep up with that.
Along the way during one of those years, I think you said John broke his wrist right before a summer run. For those of you who aren't on the road, if summer is peak season, if you've never toured, and being out of a gig right before summer starts, it's got to be a pretty shitty feeling, right? So walk us through what happened that summer.
That was an unexpected bummer, for sure. But, I had been talking with the Goon, who I'm sure many who are listening know, who was a very famous tour accountant at one time. He had always been a great supporter of mine, and he put me in touch with Craig Federman, who at the time was the tour accountant for REM. And they were doing a summer run in Europe, and he needed a tour accounting assistant, box office, ticketing person, someone to do gate drops. And at first I was like, look, I'm already a tour accountant. Like, why do I want to go out and be an assistant? Like, I thought this gig was like so beneath me. I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I'd worked really hard to become a tour accountant. And I was like, now I'm going to go out and be, an assistant again, and it had already been really hard for me as a woman to make a name for myself. And I thought I was moving backwards and, but Craig, being charming and convincing as he is, he basically said, like, come out with me. I'll teach you everything I know. And honestly, I hadn't done a lot of Europe at that point. And so, or at least not at that level, really. And this was, 20,000 capacity open fields and stadiums. And so I sort of put my ego aside, took a 50% pay cut, which was also hard for me to stomach. And basically I hit the road. And so my job was to do gate drops. Gate drops is when you collect all the ticket stubs and you count them to get a drop count to validate the ticket sales. Because back in, 2005, we didn't have scanning. There was no real way to determine how many people were at the show unless you counted the tickets. So basically, I had to figure out how many entrances, ticket takers per venue there was going to be. And then in the mornings, for every city when we arrive, I would have to go into the college areas and round up like 20 to 30 kids who wanted to see REM for free. But keep in mind, I'm in Spain and France and Italy, and, I don't speak these languages. And we don't have Google Translate. I don't think we had Google Translate at that time. So I'm basically trying to communicate with people like, do you speak English? Do you like REM? It's like 30 questions. Be like, do you want to work for me for free? So then I would corral 20 to 30 kids who wanted to see REM for free. Basically, they would work for me from doors until REM hit the stage. They'd stand by each entrance and make sure every ticket was ripped and made it into a garbage bag. And then I would collect the garbage bags and I would weigh them. So we get to Stavanger, Norway, and all day the venue and the promoter weren't giving me proper audits. They were like these total BS Excel spreadsheets, and I just knew something smelled wrong. Like nobody was being straight with me, and they were all just being like super cagey. And so Craig and I set up all of my little college kids everywhere, and people are starting to come in, and Craig and I had the suite for our office. So we could see out into the crowd. We could see down. And, when you go in a stadium and it's a GA floor in a stadium or an arena, when you look on that floor, it's usually half empty on a sold out show. That. And all of a sudden, we're looking down and you could not fit another person on that floor. And I was like, there is something up. There is no way. And then as I started to count all of the tickets, we're supposed to have something like 22,000 tickets. And I'm counting a lot more than that. The weight is coming in really, really high. And that doesn't even account for the 5 to 10% no-show rate that you usually have.
I got to stop you for 2 seconds. You said the weight. And are you weighing the tickets?
Yes, I'm weighing the tickets. So in this particular case, specific to Stavanger, they had 3 different ticket types, right? Tickets were sold on 3 different ticketing systems. And so I have to then get all of the audits and figure out if you have 22,000 tickets, right? And they're telling you that 3,000 is sold on ticket type A and 10,000 is sold on ticket type B and the rest is sold on ticket type C. Then you have to get a sample of those 3 tickets and then make a ratioed sample of 100. And you use a special scale so that when I can then take thousands of tickets and put them in a bucket and put them on the scale, it will tell me how many tickets are there. So there's this science on how to weigh tickets. And so, but that assumption is on the fact that the audits that they give you and the ticket sales are correct. So mathematically, it should work out when you weigh the tickets. But in this particular case, I started weighing a lot more than 22,000 tickets. And so it was either the ratio was wrong or they also sold more tickets than they said.
They were cheating.
And in this case, they sold a lot more tickets than they said, which I knew because they were only giving me Excel spreadsheets. They weren't able to print me off any audits from any ticketing system. They just weren't giving me any reports from anything. So I knew something was shady from the get-go. And then, once I weighed and found out that there was a lot more than 22,000, I took some of my college kids back and we sat in a room and we counted all of the tickets before we left the building. And then we took all the tickets. Well, then we counted more than 22,000 tickets. And then we confiscated the tickets and we said, these tickets are now ours. And then I proceeded to count them about 10 more times and didn't sleep for a week. And then, of course, you know, we were right. I mean, we had the proof. We had the ticket stubs. Cut to a week later, there was a check delivered to us for like $150,000. And we handed over the tickets. They gave us a check and we handed over the tickets. And then what was really awesome is that REM gave me a lovely bonus to get me to my original asking price. And even more importantly, you know, I then used that experience on One Direction in South America, which ended up paying One Direction a lot more than that. So, you know, sometimes humbling yourself up and doing a gig that you think is beneath you and that you don't have anything to learn is so wrong. So many lessons learned from that one experience. And I really can't thank Craig enough for that. And also, he's just been such an incredible supporter of mine ever since. And it really fostered a beautiful relationship for us.
To get an incredible experience like that, sounds like it served you later on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful. I mean, I'm sorry, John, that you broke your hand, or I can't remember what it was. Like you sprained his hand or something. But I'm super grateful. Like it was such a fantastic opportunity for me, and so much. I learned so much from Craig. I learned so much from that whole experience. It was really eye-opening.
So after 9 years with John, building into multi-night amphitheaters and arenas, there's probably not many places you can go in the music business that would continue to challenge and give you the opportunities to grow. But stadiums come knocking for you with One Direction. The 2 One Direction tours back-to-back that were the top-grossing world tours in back-to-back years. What in the absolute world was that like?
That was so amazing. You know, I had a little bit of opportunity in stadiums working for Live Nation and also Swedish House Mafia prior to that. So I sort of realized that, you know, I had set my sights on a stadium. So working with One Direction was definitely the most rewarding gig of my entire life. I have never given so much of myself to a job. You know, first, I never really thought that the opportunity to be a tour accountant for a worldwide stadium tour was going to be possible for me. At that time, you know, I didn't know any woman who had ever done it and that particular role. And it just seemed like the same 5 guys were doing that gig. So this opportunity presented itself, and it was just the most insane, huge learning experience when you have to settle 75 to 80 stadiums a year in multiple countries and currencies and tax mitigation and hedging, 3 stages, leapfrogging around the world, endless hotel bills and cash reconciliation. I mean, it's a budget that nobody wants to balance. I mean, it's just a behemoth. And I worked 18 hours a day, never took a day off. But once you're out there and you know, after a few months, you get into the swing of things and you become this well-oiled machine. And the team out there was amazing. The production manager, the tour manager, the crew, everyone, management was so impressive. And it was just, I'm so incredibly proud to be a part of that tour and work with everyone and how well we worked together and what we accomplished. You know, I feel like I climbed Everest about 5 times after that one. And I can't, you know, thank Modest Management enough for believing in me and supporting me and pushing me to the next level. That Richard Griffiths, he's a tough cookie, but, you know, he made me a better tour accountant, hands down. I think I also probably had a lot of hearing damage from all the girls screaming. I mean, just all the girls everywhere screaming everywhere. I learned so much about security for venues because of that. I mean, so much to learn from Liam, our head of security. I mean, when you are a gigantic city moving, you're basically a city moving from city to city, and you're setting up this incredible experience. It's something so special.
A typical show settlement on a nightly basis, you know, the tour manager is out there with either a promoter rep or a venue, you know, representative settling the show. Wham, bam, here's your backup, here's your ticket audits, here's your approved expenses, here's your, you know, marketing packs, whatever it might be that goes into a settlement. You get a check that night, you walk away. That is not the case in world tour events, right? There's pre-settlements leading into, you know, post-settlements. This is a much more extended process. Can you walk us through the differences between what, you know, an average club or theater or arena would look like on a nightly basis versus a world tour like this?
I mean, when you're in a club, in a theater, and even an arena, you call up the promoter a couple weeks out and you go over, hey, what's it looking like? What's a ticket audit? You do a little bit of a pre-settlement. You kind of get an idea of what you're walking into. Am I walking into back end or am I not? And you kind of just discuss. And since you're the expert on the road, like what's been going right, what's been going wrong. You give everybody a little bit of a heads up and you go on your merry way. And you settle the show. But with the stadium, it's just, you're talking about your average expenses on a stadium all of a sudden are $1 million plus, if not more, depending on what country you're in and how many shows you're doing and et cetera. So, but it's, you're looking at least $1 million, right? So, you don't want to call somebody 2 weeks out and be like, hey, what's up with that $1 million budget? I'm a big believer of communication. So I've got a settlement rider that's, unfortunately multiple pages long that everybody hates me for. And I'm calling you 2 months in advance and I'm giving you a heads up on what our problem areas are. I usually look at, the top 5 biggest numbers. What are we looking at? And I take a look at, those big numbers, right? Is security in line? Are things in line? And you kind of just make sure that everybody understands what we're looking at. I'm really into ticketing because for me, one of the first lessons I learned in tour accounting was follow the money. So if you don't know what's going on with your ticketing, then you don't know what's going on with the money. So really into ticket audits, releasing, getting your ticket sales, maximizing your ticket sales as much as you can, and really following the money from every direction. How much money is coming in and how much money are you spending? So you do a lot of pre-settlement, you go over all that stuff, and then you use a big behemoth of a binder. You're looking at 100 line items at least, and then you're going through line by line and, trying to bring integrity to the deal, trying to look at the big picture, and what makes sense and validating all of those expenses. So I ask for backup for every single line item, and I want to understand what's going on. I take I read the venue contract, find out, what I'm in for. And when you show up on the day before, usually you're loading in your production the day before, you get sort of a pre-settlement. You take a look at the binder, what's been actualized. Prior to that, even I set up a very complex approval process of expenses, where on One Direction, it was really fun. I had anybody who was responsible for an expense, I got in touch with them a couple months in advance, let them know that I was going to be asking them to sign off on what they were responsible for. Like my site coordinators would sign off on, everything that was building steel to the stagehands loading in and, the floor covering and all that kind of stuff. And I made them stamps. So I was obsessed with wanting to make sure that all the expenses were signed off correctly. So each of them had their own customized stamp that they would stamp on each invoice. So when I got to the venue, I expected that if anything was final or even a pre, it had to have a stamp on it from whoever was responsible for that expense. And so that way I kind of knew that everything is legit, because it's really hard to look at hundreds and hundreds of pages and know, like, did we have 5 forklifts? Did we have, how much barricade was there? I don't know how many stagehands were there 4 days before I got there when they were building the stage, So there's an approval process, a very extensive approval process in play. And then when you leave that night, you kind of have a good idea after the show what you're looking at, but there's a contingency in there because the stage still needs to come down. You still have to assess damages. You still have, you've got heavy machinery, and sometimes they're on a 60-day net for invoicing, et cetera. So you really have to be patient. Settling the stadium requires a lot of patience. And then over the next month, the finals start to trickle in, and then you actualize. But it's probably a 4-month process, 3-month process from beginning to end.
A month
for the tour accountant.
A month after.
Yeah, about a month after. Sometimes. Oh. I mean, you can't settle an arena in Australia the day of, right?
Sure.
Like you got to wait till weeks after, right? So, and this is in America. Okay. South America? Are you kidding me? If I get to settle up a stadium a month after, I'm happy. Usually at that point, I'm like, let's just take a view. You have to bring that into play as well as a tour accountant, is understanding how to do business in all those countries. Because, being on tour in America is a dream. It's easy. Like, it's really easy. Things are straightforward. There's nothing straightforward anywhere else, and especially when you're on tour with a bunch of Americans, per diems, just getting US dollars when you're not in America, not easy. It's like all of these kinds of nuances of learning how to operate in other countries is also part of the gig. It's not just settlement.
It's amazing what you can learn over that length and breadth of time that you were out on the road. That's 25 years from clubs to world stadium tours. At the end of it all, did you ever have like a first inclination or thought or something that put you in the direction that eventually took you off the road?
I think the funny thing about the road is that when you're on the road, you can't wait to be off the road. And when you're off the road, you can't wait to be back on the road. And so, there's this push and pull of life, of like, who am I and what am I doing? And I think that the last 5 years of my touring career, I went back and forth about, like, I think it's time for me to leave the road. What else is there? What am I doing? And I had once I hit One Direction, I really felt like I had sort of hit that glass ceiling and sort of, I was able to check that thing off. Like, okay, I've done that. Like, now what? Because sustaining stadiums is a lot of work. And I just think that I put myself into my job 100%. And I just knew that wasn't something that I could sustain for the rest of my life. It was just really hard on the body. And I started to look around on one day and realize, like, oh, I'm one of the old ones now. Like, I used to be one of the young ones. And now I'm like, oh, I'm an old one. So, I joke. I say I gave my fertile years to rock and roll. So I started to get a bit tired, and I thought that it might have been time to leave the road. And I kind of had a moment over the last couple of months of One Direction where I had this fetal position moment where I sort of saw the last 20 plus years flash before my eyes. And I realized, like, it's time. I think that, I've done a lot, and I wanted to leave on a high note. I didn't really want to. After One Direction, it was just such a high, and it was so great. And I felt so much gratitude, and I felt like it was time to leave the road. Left New York, and I quit the road, and I moved to Los Angeles, and I didn't know what I was going to do.
So I've got to give a huge amount of praise to CAA for figuring out how to service the needs of clients and having an expert like you inside the company advising their teams and their clients. So who at the company put this together? Whose idea was it to start to bring you into the fold at CAA?
Right. So when I was on 1D and I had that fetal position moment, it was about 4 months before it was over. And I told Brian Manning and Mike Greek, who were both the RAs for One Direction, that I was going to leave the road. And they were like, oh, no, you can't do that. Like, we have the next 2 years planned out for you. And I was like, no, I have to do this. I have to leave and at least see what it looks like. I can always go back out, but I need to know what life looks like off the road. And so they basically came to me and they said, we have an idea. And it was really between Mike Greek and Brian Manning, but really I think Brian Manning was driving that train. He was the mastermind of the whole thing. And I had also already had a relationship with Rob Light and Mitch Rose anyway, as I had worked with CAA for a lot of my touring career. So after a few conversations, and the fact that I was moving to LA and I could work out of the flagship office was really a big deal. Also, I think that really helped. And I had decided to move to LA anyway. So that wasn't a deciding factor for me. That's not what motivated me to LA. And after a few conversations, we decided to date, got married, because we just didn't really know what that looked like. But, Manning was just I said, I don't want to be an agent. I don't know what you want me to do. And he was like, I have an idea. Just come. We want your brain. We just want it here. We know that there's stuff that you could do. And so for the first 8 months of consulting, I was there. They were trying me out. I was trying them out. And after the 8 months, it was kind of a no-brainer. I couldn't believe that it hadn't been done before at that point. And kudos to Manning. Man's a genius.
Let's talk for a moment about some of the business you're working on right now as an agent at CAA. You are on the team for Riot Games, League of Legends, and Ludovico Einaudi at the company, in addition to everything else you're doing. Walk us through, what was the on-the-job prep and training for you to go from your roles on the road to this office in Los Angeles? Walk us, through your training as an agent.
Well, my training as an agent was being on the road for 20 plus years. So, sure. I think that no one could understand what a deal is better than me, right? I've settled more deals than any agent has, that's for sure. So, there was, the good news for me is that there was no one really doing my job that they hired me to do before me. So I had this incredible blank slate to sort of come into the company and see what was lacking or what holes needed to be filled. Those opportunities are just endless, right? I feel I bring a wealth of knowledge that some people at that company don't have, right? And also an opportunity to really mentor a lot of our agents who are up and coming, who are, just becoming agents and assistants. So the opportunity to just create an educational platform was there from the get-go, and that was a no-brainer. I teach classes on the art of the deal and what's a cross tour and what's a versus deal and what's a plus deal and how do you read a ticket audit and why does ticketing matter and all of these kinds of things. And then from there, I started to foster my relationships with all the different agents and find out, what's their process. Every agent has their own process. They have, they're all building houses for bands to live in on the road, and everybody builds their house a different way. So there's a lot of subtlety that goes on there. So understanding, is there a place for me with all these agents and how can I support them during their negotiation process? So there was a lot of me getting to know each agent and finding out, what's their process and how can I help them? So I started to advise the agents, it started to just happen naturally. Started to advise the agents, provide extensive analytics on deals. They have an artist, there's an AEG deal, there's a Live Nation deal. I A/B them. I make extensive spreadsheets and do analytics. And also I have the opportunity to look at a deal and say, I've been to that venue and, it doesn't cost that much, or it does cost that much, or, we're not budgeting for this and you should be budgeting for that. And it's sort of like all the devil is in the details, that kind of stuff. And I have this ability where agents have a lot of cooks in their kitchen, from management and labels and business managers and lawyers, et cetera. And they all have their own method of looking at a deal. And for me, I'm exclusively mathematics. An agent's going to come to me and I'm not going to think about politics and everything else that he or she has to deal with. For me, I'm just saying, these are the mathematics, and this is where all the bodies are buried, or this is what it looks like, and I'm A/Bing it for them. So, and that provides it's a different way of looking at a deal. And I think it really helps us. That's the difference of those subtle nuances of making a deal good to great. And understanding all these little things that go into a deal that change the mathematics of the deal. And nobody understands the mathematics of the deal better than me, because I look at a deal with how am I going to settle it? That's basically how I do it. I sort of work backwards. Here's your deal, but in order for it to make sense, I have to know how I would settle it. And if I can't figure out how to settle it, then I need to figure out why the deal doesn't make any sense. So that naturally happened there. And then we have a tech system called Engage, and that's our contracting system that was in development when I first started there. And I'm the mathematics behind all of that. So we have the ability now at CAA to put all of our deals into the system that support our versus deal, plus deals, cross deals. We support 99% of the deals out there. And it's really fantastic because we can settle every show that's given to us, and we have all the analytics in our system, and the mathematics works. So it's really a phenomenal system that they've built there, and I'm a part of that team. And then obviously I'm just this overall road expert, if you will, tax mitigation, hedging, how to get merchant to Canada, how to read a ticket audit, how do you deal with a currency exchange, or do you know any bus companies or private jet companies, or we need a tour manager, do you know anybody? All that stuff. It's endless. So on any given day, I can answer random questions from all over the place. And then, when needed, if I'm needed, I go back out on the road, which is kind of awesome. I love that. Like probably at least once a year, I get the calling that, hey, this band has arena shows all year, but they're doing 2 stadium shows, and their tour manager doesn't know how to do that or doesn't have the bandwidth to do that, but was able to do the arenas, but can't do the stadiums. Can you jump in and settle them for them? Absolutely. So I just did Queen and Adam Lambert in Japan. I've done Justin Bieber in Australia. I jump out there, and I also settle for a lot of our acts remotely. Diana Ross, Bill Maher. It happens all the time. Like all day long, I'll get hit up. Hey, can you settle the show for us? Kind of a thing. So I'm just sort of a Jane of all trades, if you will, within the company to just help support them.
So I want to talk for a second about League of Legends, because that's an interesting business. Riot Games' flagship esports game, League of Legends, is not like a typical concert or sporting experience. They are live event producers themselves internally. So can you talk about your relationship to League of Legends and how it works with them having a quote agent in the mix here? What part of the business are you working for them to further their interests?
Yeah. Well, at CAA, we represent them in a lot of different areas, but specifically in the music touring department, our responsibilities there are to work with them in developing where they're going to do their World Championship Series. I represent them for their North American League, LCS, for their European League, LEC, and for their World Championship. So my job is to vet and find venues, get availability, put the holds in place, and then negotiate the venue deals for all of their World Championship Series. So we have spring and summer splits in Europe and in North America, and then worlds, depending on where that would be. So it can be anywhere in the world where they decide. So my job is to basically find the venue, vet the venue, and negotiate all the deal points of the venue for them. And, it's phenomenal because they're such a behemoth that they don't really need a promoter. Like they just have to tell all of their players that they're coming, and those shows will sell themselves. So they self-promote. They just need someone to fill in that role of venue negotiation. And obviously we work in every venue in the world. We have relationships in every venue in the world, and we also know what those deals look like. So it's kind of a no-brainer to provide them with, incredible support on maximizing their deals at the venue. And then we also come with, the guns and the support. And then, we really fill the spot for the promoter for them. And we provide also consulting services for them that range from, hey, they'll ask me, do you know private jet companies? Or do you know someone who's good with visas for people from all over the world? Because they're operating in so many parts of the world and their players are from all over the world. So they have a lot of visa issues that they need to deal with, or they're looking for, hey, we're looking for a new head of security. Do you know anybody? And so because a live event is a live event, right? Whether you're playing video games or the kazoo or you're a big rock band, it's all same, right? So understanding all of those inner workings, those are connections and relationships that CAA and myself already have. So we bring all of that, sort of all those connections to the table for Riot. And I think we provide them with a really incredible comfort level of knowing that they're going to go into this venue and they're going to be supported by us and by the venue, by the nature of our relationships. I never imagined I'd be working with video games. Who knew?
Well, it's a huge business now and a very cool thing to be involved with. And right now, I definitely would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit at least about coronavirus and the COVID outbreak. So I assume all these things are getting postponed or delayed right now, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Devastatingly so. Obviously, this is so unexpected. And there's nothing worse than, spending all of this time curating and building this beautiful house that bands are going to go live in, and then you have to take it down or it burns to the ground, and then you have to rebuild it all over again. And that's devastating. It's an incredible dance to launch a tour and to make the deals and to do them. And now this has happened, and it's pretty devastating. But I do think that every time you build something and you have to take it down, you get to build it better. the next time. So I think that, having this perspective of what was working and what wasn't working is kind of great. You get a little bit of a do-over. I hope that we come back stronger and better. I think that people will pay more attention to the health and safety of the fans and of the bands, of course. And I'm grateful for that. So sometimes you have to get hit in the head in order to figure those things out. So it's unfortunate, but I'm going to look at the bright side of things here.
Well, speaking of rebuilding things bigger and better, when we come back from all of this, when we do have concerts and this is behind us, what do you think is going to be the most important thing that artists and their crews do to take care of themselves and their guests when concerts reopen?
I mean, I think obviously the health and safety is number one. Once you can guarantee that and make sure that everyone can be in a large group of in a space with a lot of people and everyone's going to be healthy, then everything else is kind of same. I think that more than anything, crew also need to be more mindful about taking care of themselves on the road. I think mental health is something that people are starting to realize is. I just think in general, mental health is something that is lacking. Mental health support is starting to become more and more available to crews out there. But I think all of a sudden that shock to the system when everybody realizes oh my God, the whole summer is gone or the next few months of touring is gone and we were expecting this money. People are going to start to change their habits. Crew will start taking care of themselves and, going to the gym or taking a walk and realizing that we have to be healthy all around, both financially and mentally, to handle these kinds of hiccups in life. I think that's for everybody. It's not just band and crew. It's just in life. I think that we were all running a crazy rat race. And I think that this is making everybody just take a minute and realize what's important, what do we need, how do we feel, how do we need to be supported, and how do we need to change things to operate more efficiently in both mentally and physically, and what do we need to do to be more well-rounded. So while I'm not happy that anybody has lost their jobs and tours are being canceled, I am hopeful that there is some great stuff coming out of this.
I love that enthusiasm. I love the fact that you're, working with, younger crews and newer generations of crews that have come before you. How much time are you spending in your working day mentoring people?
A lot. It ebbs and flows. I find that when things are a bit slower, like in the wintertime, when things are slowing down and the crew can sort of come up for air, they have more bandwidth at that point to say okay, there are all of these things didn't make sense when I was on tour, or I struggled with A, B, and C when I was on tour. It also works as when they get their upcoming tour schedules, in the springtime. That's a lot of times when they come to me and we sit down and we go over the deals and we can explain what those deals look like, what's a cross tour, how does that work, what's a pot tracker, what's a versus deal, what's a plus deal. So we go over that kind of stuff. And also I mentor within the company. There's a lot of assistants who are on the road to being agent, and my door is always open to walk them through deals, or they're more than welcome to always sit and watch me do my job and see how I would do it. A lot of times they'll get deals and they'll bring them to my office and they'll say, what would you do? And I sort of walk through that with them. And so the mentoring never stops, and I'm happy to do that. I didn't have a ton of mentors in my life, and that was a bummer. And I'm happy to give back this time around and make it right.
If you've got one piece of advice to offer out to new crew, to new people working in the music business today, what's it going to be?
I would say, you have to approach every job and every opportunity with curiosity. And that's going to be the driving force to learning everything and to learning something new every day. And, you can't take yourself too seriously. We're making music here and we're not curing cancer. And you just have to be really solutions-based. No one wants to hear about your problems. They just want to hear about your solutions. So I think that if you are solutions-based and you really approach everything with curiosity, that will that's going to open the door to you learning and finding out everything that you need to. And also just don't take yourself too seriously. Take a moment every day to look around and enjoy the smiling faces in the crowd, and know that you're a part of bringing music and joy to people. And I think that you have to take that moment to appreciate the fruits of your labor, or else it just feels like a job. We work in rock and roll. Like we get to work around music and musicians and creativity. And I think that taking that opportunity to really appreciate that will be your driving force to get you out of bed every day, is that you get to put smiles on people's faces. And it's kind of awesome.
Be curious, have fun. Great words to live by. Ina Jacobs, thank you for coming on Promoter 101. This was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It was super fun. I appreciate it.
Luke Pierce taking charge on the feature this week in a big way with a very impressive Ina Jacobs. Well done, my friend. Well done.
Hi, this is Jamie Kelsel, an agent at APA in Los Angeles, and I am on Promoter 101.
That'll do it. Episode 211 of Promoter 101 in the bag. Thank you so much, the listener, for being here, taking time out of your week to sit down with Dan and I. And special thanks to our great guest this week from Minneapolis and First Avenue, Dayna Frank, and all the way from Los Angeles, CAA's Ina Jacobs. Thank you both for being such lovely and amazing guests this week. Love having you on this podcast. If you like what you heard today, let Dan and I know. Hit us. Email at steiny@promoter101.net. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much for joining us, every last one of you.
That's right. Just like the past couple of weeks, we are wishing for shows to come back and play as safe and as soon as possible.
Cheers!
Call your mother and wash your hands.
Hello there, Andy Summers from APA and Promoter 101. Happy to be here.
Campfire